You know, some stories from history, they just feel like they were written for the big screen, right? You've got the unlikely hero, the impossible odds, that defiant last stand against an overwhelming force. They seem almost too perfect, too cinematic to actually be true. But every now and then, the historical record gives us something that even Hollywood wouldn't dare to invent. It gives us a real person whose actions completely defy logic, expectation, and frankly, our understanding of human endurance. Today, we are diving deep into one of those stories. Just let those words sink in for a second. They kept coming, wave after wave. I stopped counting after the 40th one fell. This isn't some official report. It's not a boastful war story told in a bar years later. This is a line from a letter written home by a man trying to put into words the unimaginable hell he had just survived. Can you even picture it? The bone-deep exhaustion after days without sleep, the bitter, freezing January cold that seeps into your very soul, the constant ringing in your ears from explosions, and just the sheer, overwhelming weight of that moment that leads him to write that sentence. We're about to meet the man who stared down an entire army and then somehow lived to write home about it.
Now, to really get a grip on what happened over those insane 48 hours, we can't just start on the battlefield. No, that's not where this story begins. It begins with the man himself, a man who the United States Army initially decided wasn't even good enough to fight.
Okay, look at this slide. This right here is an almost unbelievable irony. On the left, you see his initial classification, 4F. That's the Army's code for unfit for combat duty. And the reason? His eyesight was just terrible. So by the Army's own strict standards, he was not soldier material, period. Now look at the right. You see what he ultimately became, a master sergeant and a recipient of the Medal of Honor, which is the nation's highest, absolute highest, award for battlefield valor. So the question that just hangs in the air is, how on earth does a man go from the column on the left to the one on the right?
His journey was one of just pure, stubborn, unyielding will. Vito Bertoldo was the son of a coal miner from Illinois. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, he did what thousands of other patriotic young men did. He rushed to the nearest recruitment center to enlist. But the Army looked at him, tested his eyes, and turned him away. Sorry, kid, you're not good enough. But he just refused to take no for an answer. He found a back way in, enlisting as a cook, and for 2 long years, while the war raged across the globe, he was behind the lines, petitioning, begging, relentlessly pushing for a transfer to a combat unit. Finally, in 1944, with the Allies desperate for replacement soldiers after the bloody D-Day invasion, they finally gave in. Think about that. The man literally had to fight for years just to get into the fight.
So by January 1945, Bertoldo is in France. He's with the 42nd Infantry Division, a replacement soldier in a unit full of combat veterans, and he is about to be thrown into a situation that was, by every possible objective measure, completely and utterly hopeless. To understand his actions, you have to get the context. This wasn't some minor firefight. This was Operation Nordwind, or Northwind. This was Hitler's last, desperate, all-or-nothing gamble in the West. While most of the world was focused on the Battle of the Bulge happening to the north, Hitler secretly launched another massive offensive in the south. The whole point was to shatter the American lines, drive a wedge through the Allied armies, and change the course of the war. And the small, war-torn town of Hatten, France, stood directly in the path of this German juggernaut. This really just lays out the staggering, frankly terrifying odds. Bertoldo's unit, the 1st Battalion, was already worn down from months of hard fighting. They were exhausted, they were low on supplies, and they were freezing in the dead of winter. And who were they facing? They were up against elements of 2 elite German divisions, the 21st Panzer and the 25th Panzer Grenadiers. These weren't fresh conscripts. These were battle-hardened, fanatical veterans of multiple campaigns, and they were backed by tanks. I mean, the numbers, the experience, the equipment, everything was overwhelmingly stacked against the Americans. So as the German assault hits its peak, the order finally comes down. Evacuate the battalion command post. The position was just untenable. They were about to be overrun. But someone had to stay behind. Someone had to provide covering fire to buy the others precious seconds to escape. And who do you think volunteered? Vito Bertoldo, the cook with bad eyesight who had fought tooth and nail just to be there. This is the exact moment his story turns from history into pure legend. 48 hours, 2 full days, and nights. I want you to really think about that. 48 hours with no sleep, no relief, no backup, nothing. Just one man, a machine gun, and the entire focused fury of the German offensive directed right at him. For 2 days, Vito Bertoldo would become the sole defender of the American line. He was the line.
His very first act was one of stunning, almost suicidal defiance. To get a better field of fire, and more importantly, to draw the enemy away from his retreating comrades, he didn't hide in the rubble, no. He dragged his heavy machine gun out into the middle of the street, deliberately making himself the single most obvious, most unmissable target on the entire battlefield. And then, he opened fire.
Well, the Germans, seeing this lone machine gunner, couldn't believe their luck. They concentrated everything they had on him. Mortars, artillery, machine guns, all of it focused on his one little spot. At one point, an artillery shell landed so close that the concussion, the sheer force of the blast, literally threw him clear across a room he'd taken cover in. The official Medal of Honor citation notes, with this incredible clinical understatement, that he just got up, shook it off, and went right back to his gun.
The enemy was getting desperate, so they escalated. They brought up a tank. From less than half a football field away, it aimed its main cannon right at his building and fired. The shells slammed into his position. It destroyed his machine gun into a twisted wreck of metal, and, for a second time, it violently blasted him across the room. Now just picture that. He's wounded. He's disoriented. His primary weapon is gone. For any other soldier on the planet, this would have been the end. Surrender or die.
But it wasn't the end. As the German infantry started to move forward, assuming their target was finally neutralized, Bertoldo scrambled through the dust and rubble and found a crate of grenades. With no gun, he started throwing them, one by one, right into the faces of the attacking soldiers. Imagine their shock. The assault faltered, then it broke, and then they retreated. His weapon was gone, but his will to fight, it was unbreakable. So let's just recap the cost. Over those 48 hours, he single-handedly blunted the advance of 2 elite German divisions. The military officially confirmed he killed at least 40 enemy soldiers. He survived multiple concussions, shrapnel wounds, burns, all without a single moment of rest or medical attention. He didn't just hold the line. For 2 days, he was the American line in Hatten.
When American reinforcements finally fought their way back into the town, they found Bertoldo still at his post. He was barely conscious, but he was still there, refusing to be evacuated until he personally knew the position was secure. But believe it or not, his battle and his service to his country were far from over. This is incredible. Even the enemy commander, a German colonel named Hans von Luck, wrote about it in his memoirs after the war. Now, he never knew it was just one man, but he noted with total astonishment the shocking, unbelievable tenacity of the American defense in that town. He wrote that these strong points that according to every military textbook should have collapsed in minutes, somehow held on for days. It completely disrupted the entire German timetable for the offensive. He was writing about Veto Bertoldo. After the war, his fight just continued on a different front. President Truman himself personally appointed him as a representative for the Veterans Administration. For more than a decade, the man who refused to quit on the battlefield used that exact same tenacity to fight for his fellow veterans in Washington, testifying before Congress, advocating for better benefits, and, crucially, for better mental health services. His service didn't end when he took off that uniform. It just changed form.
And his legacy, it absolutely endures. Today, his 48-hour stand is taught as a case study in tactical decision-making and courage under fire at West Point. His old division, the 42nd Infantry, gives out an annual award for courage in his name. In that small town of Hatten, France, a memorial marks the very spot where he made his stand. His story continues to remind new generations of what one truly determined person is capable of achieving. This quote from a modern officer in Bertoldo's old division just captures it perfectly, doesn't it? In our current age of drones, satellites, and high-tech warfare, Bertoldo's story is this raw, powerful reminder that while technology is always changing, the fundamental strength of any army, of any group, is the unconquerable will of the individual. It's the person who simply refuses to be broken. And that's really what it comes down to. Think about it. Veto Bertoldo was a coal miner's son with bad eyesight. He was a man the system had rejected, who was never even supposed to be in combat in the first place. By all measures, he was an ordinary man. He was ordinary, right up until the moment history demanded that he become extraordinary. And it leaves us with a really challenging question, one for all of us to think about. What untested potential, what deep reserve of refusal to quit, lies waiting inside each of us, just waiting for its moment?